Let's read my followers' stories.
In a secluded part of the countryside, where the trees grew dense and the roads were overgrown, there stood a mansion that time had forgotten. Known locally as the Whispering House, it was a place shrouded in mystery and fear. Over the years, tales of eerie whispers and strange occurrences had turned the house into a local legend, with many claiming that those who entered the shadowed halls never returned, or came back forever changed. The mansion was an imposing structure, its once grand facade now a decaying relic of another era. The stone walls were covered in thick ivy, and the roof sagged in places, as though the house were bowing under the weight of its own dark history. Broken windows, their glass shattered and cobwebbed, gazed at like hollow eyes. The estate around it was equally neglected, with wild vines creeping over the garden and the paths hidden beneath a thick layer of fallen leaves. Daniel and Emily were a young couple from the city, eager to escape the relentless pace of urban life. They were in their late 20s, both with a sense of adventure and a love for the mysterious and unexplained. Daniel was tall, with dark, unruly hair and a passion for exploration. Emily was shorter, with bright, curious eyes and a more cautious nature. Their relationship had always been one of balance, with Daniel's boldness tempered by Emily's sense of reason. They had planned a weekend getaway to the countryside, hoping for a peaceful retreat in a quaint bed and breakfast they had booked in a nearby village. However, their GPS signal had failed them, and the winding country road seemed endless. The scenic drive turned into a labyrinth of twists and turns, with the sun dipping lower and the light fading. As they drove, the conversation dwindled, replaced by the increasing tension of getting lost. They had long since left behind the familiar landmarks and signs, and the forest encroached on them from both sides, making them feel increasingly isolated. "This doesn't look right," Emily said, glancing nervously at the map on her phone. The screen was blank, the GPS having lost its signal. "Let's just keep going," Daniel replied, trying to sound confident. "We'll find our way eventually." Just as Emily was about to voice her growing concern, the dense forest opened up to reveal a large, overgrown estate. The mansion loomed ahead, its dark silhouette almost ghostly against the setting sun. The sight of it was both fascinating and unsettling. "Wow," Daniel said, his eyes widening. "Look at that place." Emily shivered. "It looks like something out of a horror movie." "I bet it's just abandoned," Daniel said, more to convince himself than Emily. "Let's see if anyone there can help us get directions." Despite her reservations, Emily agreed, and they drove up to the rusted iron gates that hung crookedly on their hinges. The gravel path leading to the mansion was overgrown with weeds and wild vines, and as they approached, the mansion seemed to watch them with its dark, empty windows. They got out of the car and walked up to the gate, which groaned loudly as Daniel pushed it open. The path was uneven, the gravel crunching under their feet as they made their way to the front door. The door was slightly ajar, and as they pushed it open further, a rush of musty, stale air greeted them. The interior was dimly lit by the last rays of sunlight filtering through broken windows. Dust hung in the air, and the scent of decay was almost palpable. "Hello," Daniel called out, his voice echoing through the silent hallway. The only response was the sound of the wind rustling through the cracks in the walls. The hallway was lined with faded portraits and peeling wallpaper, the floorboards creaking ominously under their weight. "This place is eerie," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's just an old house," Daniel said, though he too felt an unsettling chill. "Let's look around a bit. Maybe we'll find someone." They stepped inside, the door swinging shut behind them with a heavy thud. The hallway seemed to stretch on endlessly, and every corner was shrouded in shadow. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was broken only by the faint creaking of the house. As they explored, they noticed how the house seemed to be frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture, broken chandeliers, and faded photographs created a haunting tableau of a life that had once been vibrant. Each room they entered felt colder and more oppressive, as if the house were alive and aware of their presence. In one room, they found an old grand piano, its keys yellowed and cracked. Daniel couldn't resist the urge to play a note. As he pressed a key, the discordant sound echoed through the house, causing a shiver to run down Emily's spine. The whispers began then, faint at first, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. But they grew louder, more distinct, and more unsettling. "Do you hear that?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded, though he couldn't quite place the sound. It was as if the whispers were coming from all directions, swirling around them, growing in intensity with each passing moment. The whispers grew louder and more insistent, filling the empty spaces with an unnerving presence. They moved through the house, trying to locate the source of the sound, but the whisper seemed to follow them, always just out of reach. As they ventured deeper into the mansion, they began to feel an overwhelming sense of dread. The house seemed to be alive, shifting and changing as they moved. The layout was disorienting, with rooms that seemed to appear and disappear, corridors that twisted and turned in impossible ways. In one room, they found an old, dusty mirror. As Daniel examined it, he noticed something strange in the reflection, shadowy figures moving in the background, just at the edge of the mirror's surface. When he turned around, the room was empty, but the feeling of being watched persisted. "We need to get out of here," Emily said, her anxiety growing. "This place is giving me the creeps." But as they turned to leave, they heard it, the sound of shuffling footsteps coming from the next room. They froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. "Hello," Daniel called out, but there was no response. With a mixture of fear and curiosity, they approached the door to the next room. It was slightly ajar, and as they pushed it open, they found themselves in a large, ornate parlor. The room was in surprisingly good condition compared to the rest of the house, though still draped in dust and shadows. And then they saw her, a woman standing by a large, cracked window, her back to them. She was dressed in an old-fashioned gown, her dark hair cascading down her back in tangled waves. She stood motionless, staring out the window at something only she could see. "Excuse me," Daniel said, trying to get her attention. "Can you help us? We are lost." The woman didn't respond, didn't even move. Her stillness was unsettling, and the whispers grew louder, as if in response to her presence. Emily's heart raced. "We should go," she whispered urgently. But before they could retreat, the woman began to turn. Her movements were slow and unnatural, as if she were being pulled by invisible strings. When she finally faced them, her appearance was horrifying. Her face was pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow and dark. A cold, lifeless smile spread across her lips. The whisper surged to a deafening roar, filling the room with a cacophony of sound. The temperature dropped sharply, and the air grew thick with the stench of decay. Emily screamed, her voice piercing through the chaos. "Run!" Daniel grabbed her hand, and they bolted for the door. They ran down the hallway, their footsteps echoing through the house as the whispers followed them, relentless and haunting. The walls seemed to close in on them, the corridors stretching and twisting, leading them deeper into the mansion's dark heart. They stumbled through the house, their panic mounting as the whispers grew louder, more frenzied. The house seemed to shift around them, with doors appearing and disappearing, rooms that seemed to change their locations. The air was thick with the feeling of something malevolent, a presence that seemed to be hunting them. Finally, they reached the front door, throwing it open and bursting out into the cold night air. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving them in an eerie silence. They didn't stop running until they reached their car, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. As they sped away, the mansion receded into the darkness behind them. The drive back to the city was a blur of adrenaline and fear. They said little, the experience too overwhelming to put into words. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and their racing hearts. When they finally reached the safety of their hotel, they tried to make sense of what had happened. They spoke to the local townsfolk, who revealed the tragic history of the Whispering House. It was said to be cursed, haunted by the spirits of those who had died within its walls. The house was a place of sorrow and darkness, a place where the past refused to rest. Determined to rid themselves of the lingering fear, they sought the help of a paranormal expert. Under her guidance, they returned to the mansion one final time. With her help, they performed a cleansing ritual to rid the house of its dark presence. As they completed the ritual, the house trembled, the whispers rising to a final, agonized wail before falling silent. The atmosphere lightened, and the oppressive feeling lifted. Daniel and Emily left the mansion with a sense of relief, knowing that they had helped to put some of the restless spirits to rest. Though they returned to their city life and resumed their plans for the future, the experience left an indelible mark on them. They would never forget the Whispering House and the shadows that lurked within its walls. The mansion remained a dark memory, a reminder that some places are best left alone, and that the past, no matter how dark, can cast a long shadow over the present.
Thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. If you want to share your story, write it down in the comments. Peace.
Do you love me, guys? Yes or no?